And now, please welcome a man whose suits are legendary, a true undefeated podcast legend, a man that has never been pinned by Shawn Michaels or Bret the Hitman Hart, a man who makes Adam Lavelle weep in fear when it is time to debate wrestling, an icon of Central Pennsylvania indie wrestling, and the creator of Lancaster Championship Wrestling, and again, a man whose suits are legendary. He is Jason the Perfect Owner Smith.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am the Perfect Owner, Jason Smith, and welcome to a very special YouTube edition of the Perfect Podcast. Now, today I'm here by myself. The Perfect Owner is alone in studio. I do have a very special guest on the line. I'll be getting to him in just a moment. But this is our kind of a foray into YouTube. So all of the Perfect Podcasts, which drop every Wednesday, you can subscribe on iTunes to get the Perfect Podcast right into your device of choice. But make sure you subscribe to the Perfect Podcast. Like I said, that drops every Wednesday. This is, however, a little special edition because the Perfect Owner has had a lot of awards bestowed upon him at the end of 2016. I was named the National Podcasting Alliance Man of the Year, which is a huge honor. The Perfect Podcast was named Podcast of the Year by the National Podcasting Alliance. And that is another huge honor. I mean, the National Podcasting Alliance is the governing body of all podcasts. So to be bestowed as the Podcast of the Year is a huge, huge honor. So what has happened over the last few weeks is I've received these incredible, well-deserved accolades. And it seems that some folks who also have podcasts in the Central Pennsylvania area and also cover, kind of the same material that the Perfect Podcast covers, Central Pennsylvania independent professional wrestling. Namely 3 Count Thursday. I'll name the podcast. They've had a little bit of issue with the Perfect Owner. I have chalked it up to jealousy because of the awards that I've won. And I normally try and take the high road and stay out of the kind of things that 3 Count Thursday wants to drag me into. But they've made some accusations that are completely erroneous. They have no cogent proof of any of these erroneous accusations that they're making. They have claimed that the National Podcasting Alliance, the governing body of all podcasts, is not real. And they've claimed that it's just something that was made up to further, I guess, my agenda. I don't know why somebody would make something like that up, but they also believe that the president, CEO of the National Podcasting Alliance, Steve, is not a real person. So I had the opportunity to talk to Steve the other night, and I asked him, "Hey, Steve, can we do like a little bit of an impromptu interview? I'll get you on the phone. We'll talk. We'll talk about the National Podcasting Alliance." And he said, "Sure." So welcome to a special YouTube episode of the Perfect Podcast. The president, CEO of the National Podcasting Alliance, Steve, welcome to the Perfect Podcast YouTube edition.
Well, it's a total true pleasure to be talking to someone like yourself, the Perfect Owner, Jason Smith. It's such a pleasure, and I heard your little intro. The awards that have been bestowed upon you by the National Podcasting Alliance, who is a real group, I assure you. that's something that we don't take lightly. We just don't give out Man of the Year awards to people who are not deserving of them. And quite frankly, all of the things that you've done, Jason, for podcasting this past year, all the things that you've done for Central Pennsylvania independent wrestling, even the things you've done for Adam Lavelle, bringing him out of obscurity more into the limelight to further his wrestling done right agenda. Those are all things that we take into consideration when naming the Man of the Year, the Podcast of the Year. All those things are what we look for in great people, great podcasts, and you have certainly fit the bill.
Well, thank you so much, Steve. It's a pleasure. It's been a pleasure over this last year getting to know you and your family, and some of the things that the National Podcasting Alliance, some of the good things that the National Podcasting Alliance does. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the National Podcasting Alliance itself? When was it founded? How did it come about?
Well, that's great. That's a great question. The National Podcasting Alliance has been around since, I believe, 1972. We were kind of cutting edge at the time, knowing what was going to happen with podcasting in general. Now, there were no specific they weren't called podcasts, obviously, back in 1972, as you can imagine. A lot of the podcasts back then were known as interviews, and they were printed on vinyl. If somebody wanted to get an interview out there with a famous person, they would stamp it on vinyl, hand it out at their local record store or whatnot. Market it so that it would get into the hands of people with record players, and they could listen to those interviews. Now, over the years, it has developed into what it is now, where podcasting is an incredible medium at the moment. Did you know that currently there are over 30 million podcasts? 30 million. And at the rate that podcasts are expanding, I just saw a stat the other day that every day in the world, another 1.7 million podcasts are created every day. And that's an astonishing number. We're adding staff to monitor these podcasts at an exponential rate. Because one of the things that we do is monitor and control content in podcasts. We monitor them all. We make sure that everything's on the level. And it's a thankless job, number one. And it's a job that has to be done. Or else people could just go on podcasts and say anything they want at any time they want, which is a ridiculous concept in itself.
Well, that brings up something that I wanted to get to. I mean, it sounds incredible that you guys monitor all podcasts, and you do it out of your headquarters. Obviously, now, a couple of episodes ago on the Perfect Podcast, we had an incident where I was deemed as the loser of the podcast.
Right.
And the National Podcasting Alliance, and due to some erroneous things that Adam Lavelle and Irish J did, the National Podcasting Alliance was able to come in and correct the wrong that was done to the Perfect Owner. You guys heard it. You guys stepped right in.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely.
And you guys provided sanctions upon Irish J and Adam Lavelle silencing their mics for the next podcast. They had to sit out, so to speak, for a suspension. Is that something that happens a lot in podcasting?
Well, I wouldn't say it happens a lot, but when it does, we have to address it immediately. I mean, there are a few examples over the past couple weeks. We've dealt with a major one, a major controversy with Steve and Sid's Pet Paradise Parade podcast. They were actually, excuse me, they were actually neutering and spaying animals on the show, which we had to shut down. So we were able to shut the whole neutering and spaying thing down via our National Podcasting Alliance Task Force, which we sent right in. They knocked down the door of the studio. They got to the animals in time. We were able to save a couple hamsters, a couple guinea pigs. It was a crazy time at the National Podcasting Alliance, but the government has given us that authority to be able to act upon finding these huge transgressions. That's just one example. You know, we had to do the we had to do the step in, the suspension on Adam Lavelle and Irish J. And there's no hard feelings with the National Podcasting Alliance and those guys. Those guys have come to me personally and apologized for their transgressions. So, you know, we want to keep podcasts on the up and up. We want to keep podcasting a level playing field. You were really the only undefeated podcaster to speak of around right now. So, you know, it's a pleasure and an honor to have you representing the National Podcasting Alliance as our Man of the Year, as the chairperson of our social club. You know, the great things that you do, the perfect owner.
Well, thank you so much, Steve. I can't say how much I appreciate the National Podcasting Alliance and how they recognize me as a contributing artist, if you will. I think of podcasting as an art, and what do you do about guys like 3 Count Thursday? You know, you listen to their shows. I'm sure you've heard the ranting and banter about, you know, the National Podcasting Alliance is not real. Jason's just making this nonsense up to get himself over. What do you what do you say to something like that?
Well, you know, it's one of those slippery slopes where you have to give a little bit of freedom of speech to people. You can't just go in and shut them down. I suspect that what they're doing is trying to use the perfect owner to get some ratings, to get more people listening to their podcast. And that's not necessarily a terrible thing. It's not something that I would, mobilize the National Podcasting Alliance Task Force for. But, the other part of it is you can't just go around saying whatever you want with no consequences. You can't just go and say, yes, the National Podcasting Alliance doesn't exist, even though we clearly do. And I'm talking here. You can't just do that. If it's something that continues by 3 Count Thursday, we'll step in. I'll send the task force to lay down the law, so to speak. That's the kind of thing that we're here for. We're here to make sure podcasting is fair and balanced. And, I can't state enough how important the National Podcasting Alliance is to podcasting, because a lot of people don't know necessarily about the National Podcasting Alliance. It's not like we advertise. We've just joined social media not too long ago, as the government has actually required us to do so. It's something that on all levels we try to be fair, but man, you mess with the bull, long enough, you're going to get the horns, and the National Podcasting Alliance is the horns. So,
right.
That being said, 3 Count Thursday, they're the kind of guys that gotta, maybe look to picking a different fight, if you will.
No, Steve, that totally makes sense to me. I get it. Not everybody gets it. Sometimes it'll take a raid from the National Podcasting Alliance to straighten people out. They just go around saying whatever they want to further whatever agenda they have. Steve, it has been, we're at about 15 minutes here. I don't want to take too much more of your time. I know you have a lot of work to do.
Thank you.
This has been great. We'll catch up next week, Steve. I'll be in the area, and we'll get together for dinner.
That would be so awesome, Jason. Thank you. Keep up the great work. Say hello to Adam Lavelle and Irish J for me. Thank you again.
There you have it. Steve, the president, CEO of the National Podcasting Alliance, right here on the Perfect Podcast Special Edition, YouTube edition. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Great interview with Steve. He is a great man, let me tell you. The 3 Count Thursday guys should probably mind what they're saying a little bit more. You just heard what Steve said. So, folks, it's been great. Make sure you subscribe to the Perfect Podcast. It drops every Wednesday. We have this week coming up a very special Matthew Riddle edition of the Perfect Podcast. He'll be our guest. Tune in. Thank you once again. Perfect Podcast.